when I started in management, in an investment bank, I thought I knew everything there was to know about leadership. It was actually pretty simple. Leadership was all about showing the way, leading by example. Who in here says I lead by example? Right? Leading by example, very often said, and being, morally an example as well, or striving to be a moral example. I moved on. This approach seemed to work for me. The first team I had was analysts who were smart and were all recruited by me, so guess what? They were very much like me. I moved on to be a CFO for a financial services organization, and it still seemed to work. Pretty much the same thing. Do not lend your ear to gossip. Do not stay based on facts, not opinions and bias. Look at the big picture. Don't get tangled into the details, right? Stay at the strategic level. Inspire through excellence in financial knowledge. Worked. It worked for me. And then I was offered the regional CFO role for a major insurer based in Amsterdam. This was a big change. 12 countries, 20 billion balance sheet consolidated. Lots of products, distribution channels I had never seen before. The regional finance team from where I stood were a group of bureaucrats who really needed a big change there, so there was a lot of work to do with them. We were preparing for Solvency II, which was a sort of Basel III, if some of you are familiar with it, on steroids. Oh, and we were implementing a 300 million euro mammoth digital transformation program across the region that was basically turning every stone there was to turn in our operational systems. So all in all, an irresistible challenge, right? For someone who loved challenges and had usually wanted them before. How do you think it went? I accepted the role, of course. How do you think it went? Who thinks it went very well? Optimistic, that's very nice of you, thank you. There's the gentleman in the front row. Now, that would be a funny narrative, wouldn't it? I did well, and then I did better, and then I did the best, thank you very much. No, this is the moment where the hero learns something, right? The hero takes a fall and learns something in their journey. And because it's a very good story, it's the all is lost moment. So I really thought I was in burnout about a year and a half later, and I really thought, this is it, I'm leaving, and I don't think anyone would have tried to keep me very much. Everything I thought I knew about leadership wasn't working. It felt like I had been handed this beautiful command deck with buttons and levers, but every time I pushed a button, nothing happened. Pull a lever, you're left with it in your hand. I didn't get followership. I didn't get my issues, my topics, my agenda, if you wish, which was not a personal agenda. It was what I wanted for finance. I wasn't getting it through. I wasn't getting people to follow me. I was wise enough not to blame people around me. I mean, this was not one of those toxic environments. These were mostly decent people who had been put under a lot of pressure and uncertainty and ambiguity. So yes, there was more politics than you'd even expect in a regional office. I blamed myself. I was not leader-like enough. I was not inspirational enough to really carry the day, because this is what books and talks and leadership development programs told us. Great leaders, right, carry the day. It doesn't matter if they were handed a very bad hand of cards. You still work with what you have. So maybe this leadership thing just wasn't for me. Now, what I was actually missing was a set of skills that I hadn't known I needed. I hadn't needed much until then. Things like political knowledge, things like knowing where the power lies, things like influencing others without authority, like issue selling, presenting, framing your issue so that it is adopted by others, creating alliances, networking. I didn't know any of these things. What I also was missing was a definition of leadership like this. which is actually, funnily enough, it's what researchers in leadership define it like. We don't agree about much, but this one we pretty much agree on. Leadership is an influence process, right? Influence and process are very important there. I don't see anything there about great. Do you? Don't see anything there about morality. Interesting, maybe for our panel discussion. It's a process whereby an individual influences a group to get to common goals. What I missed most importantly was this wisdom to realize that even with all those skills I just spoke about, I would still have probably done an okay job under those circumstances. And that was good enough. This is my assessment now. I'm in a PhD in leadership and many years later. Back then I struggled because nobody spoke about it like this. Leadership development, books, gurus never speak about these things, and they don't speak about them today. What they do talk about is a infantile, simplifying, moralizing view of leadership. A bit like if you started your adult life equipped with a view of society based on this. It's not wrong, it's just dangerously incomplete, isn't it? And I've interviewed a lot of leaders, recently finance leaders, for my book that was just mentioned. And some of them struggle with this impossible ideal. Many of them actually still sort of live in this world, and they can do it because they can afford to ignore the subtleties, because they mostly rely, like I did for a long time, on expertise. Finance leaders, unlike, say, operations leaders or sales leaders, can rely on expertise only or mostly until much later in their career progression. And you know, it's not even about seniority either, because if you're, do we still have fintech founders, fintech leaders here? If you're a fintech leader, and I don't know what stage you're at, but you probably already start pretty early on, and say you have a background in finance, you start by leading people who are very different from you. I mean, you'll have, I don't know, maybe an academic who agreed to help you in the spare time, or a brilliant data scientist who, however, cannot work with any other human being, or a developer who is ebullient and great with people, but you know, has the attention of a goldfish. I'm stereotyping wildly just to make the point, right? And a few other people like that. So very early on, you have to use skills like influencing, because you don't really have a lot of formal power. They can step out the door at any time. Framing, telling the story, showing continuous optimism when maybe you don't really feel like it, right? Continuously selling and retelling the story of what you're doing and what is happening, sense-making, sense-giving. So a lot more than be morally right and be an expert in finance, isn't it? Leadership researchers have actually distilled a set of behaviors of leader behaviors that is shown to deliver in terms of followership. And there's almost 3,000 studies published to date in reputable journals on transformational leadership only. These are only the meta-analysis on it. So one of 127 studies showing that most relationships are positive between transformational leadership and employee creativity. Another one on employee well-being that shows that in general, transformational leadership positively predicts positive measures of well-being and negatively the negative measures of well-being. And maybe this one, the most comprehensive in the Leadership Quarterly, over 600 samples where they find not only that it works, but also the mechanisms through which it works, and that it delivers employee task performance. They work more and better. Citizenship behavior, they step in when it's not in their job description to do so, very important. And innovative behavior. Obviously, with only the first two, you won't get very far in our world. You want them to care about you and the company so much that they'll think, what else can I do? How can we do this better? How can we do this different? So transformational leadership seems to deliver all of this. It contains 4 buckets of behaviors. I'm not teaching, so I'm not going to go in detail here. But what you might notice is that these seem to be pretty simplistic too. So are we back in children book world? Like the leader should have strong values. Or, I don't know if you can see it here, helps me develop my strengths. Right? That sounds very idealized, doesn't it? What is important is to realize that all of this is in the perception of your followers. If they don't see your values as the right values, you might have very strong values, this is not gonna work. If they, or some of them, see that you help one develop their strengths but not the other, they might see it as favoritism, not as transformational leadership. So the perception is reality, the old dictum is very, very important. Anyway, what is more important, I think, is not whether it delivers, because if you are lucky enough to have a really inspiring leader, who had a leader that was truly inspiring? 1, 2, whew. That might say something about finance again. So if you are lucky enough to have an inspiring leader, you'd find that they more or less did these things. So this is not the interesting part. The interesting part is what makes this happen? What makes it possible? What stops it from being possible? What are the moderators, the antecedents, right? The boundaries? And obviously most of those 3,000 studies are about that. They can't all be about it works. Oh, it works also here, it works. They are mostly about when it doesn't work or when it works differently. So let me propose a simple, not simplistic, model of leadership that, and you know, we love a good acronym. So of course it's the LIFE model of leadership, where the interaction, the success of the interaction, in this case transformational leadership, depends on the leader, surprise, but also on followers, their intelligence, their personality, what implicit leadership theories they have, what are their ideas about what a leader looks like, how a leader behaves, and the environment. How much power do you have? The culture of the organization, the culture of the country. What is the business context? Are you losing money or not? Makes sense? Makes a lot of sense. Is it new? No. Surprising? No. What do we do most of the time? We ignore this bit and we focus on this one, right? Great leaders have the intelligence, the personality, the values, the psychological capital, which is a fancy word for energy, and the skills and experience to carry the day. Great leaders are great, always, right? Actually, life, like in my example, but many others, that life from before can make or break your leadership. Why is it important to keep that in mind? So that you don't get terribly smug when things go your way leadership-wise, and you don't get completely depressed when they don't, and you think it's all about you. This may sound like a small thing, but it is so important in people's attitudes about continuing to invest in this leadership. And ironically, finance professionals are very well trained to think like that when it comes to investment returns, right? It's never entirely 100% your own merit or your own fault, but somehow they still fall prey to this illusion when it comes to leadership. Another moralizing prescription that I took very seriously. Great leaders let their actions speak for them. Walk the talk, or even better, walk no talk, right? And it's again something that finance leaders tend to do more because we like facts and figures and evidence. So not talking, and definitely no self-presentation talking. There's a dialogue in Plato's Republic that some of you might know, where Plato has Socrates talk with Glaucon, and obviously they use the famous Socratic method, and they arrive to the conclusion that the truly virtuous man, and it's always men because women had not been invented in Plato's time, right? So the truly virtuous man is someone who behaves exemplarily, but is not seen as is seen as the opposite, actually. all people around him think that he's a crook, he's horrible, he's morally corrupt, because only then will they have no external reason to behave exemplarily, and then they are truly virtuous. True, and we keep that view, Platonic view of virtue to this day, and it's true, and when it comes to virtue, it's not gonna get you leadership. If you behave exemplarily but nobody knows, you are not a leader, you are the unknown hero. You might get results because, hey, you are behaving exemplarily, but if others followed you, you would get the leverage effect. You would get more things being done virtuously because you are acting now with more people following you. So I realize it's a tightrope walk. You don't want to toot your own horn, but you still want to control the narrative, well, to influence the narrative that is being told out there about you and about what you're doing or trying to achieve. Can be not seen or interpreted very differently. One last myth from a children's book land. Charismatic leaders are bad people. You've heard that one? We don't need more charismatic leaders. You've seen how much harm they can wreak. Not to talk about charismatic leaders in finance. I mean, after the great financial crisis, we don't want to hear that word anymore. But charismatic leadership is actually half of transformational leadership. And I don't mean metaphorically, I mean literally. It is the top half of transformational leadership. This is how it is defined. It's all about who the leader is and what the leader is trying to achieve and how inspired you are by this combo. And also there is very exciting, relatively recent research, mostly in the Leadership Quarterly, that's been taking causal inference very seriously, so no correlations, that is looking at a set of techniques called the charismatic leadership techniques that do deliver a lot of follower results in the direction we want them. Engagement, productivity, proactive behavior, they work for all sizes, small team to political leader, and in all media, face-to-face, but also online, also through social media. Quite a bit of research being done there. No, don't worry, we are not going through the detail here, but what is important to know is that, obviously, first of all, this is no rocket science. It is things you are familiar with. It would be strange if somehow charisma would be something you've never heard of. Right? So what is it? It's mostly about, here, this part is mostly about content, moral, value-driven content, setting high goals, confidence that goals can be achieved. You will get the presentation, of course. Expressing the group's sentiments, having strong moral conviction, all in the eyes of your followers, remember? And then rhetorical devices that we know well, and of whom I think the king and queen are metaphors and stories. But of course, other things. So again and again, when leaders use this combo in talking to followers, they get all those amazing results from before. Now, charismatic leaders are bad leaders. Let's not do it because it's dangerous, right? Did Gandhi use the CLTs? Yes, he's actually used as an example in many of these papers. Did Jim Jones, the leader of the 600 mass suicide in Jonestown, use the CLTs? Apparently, yes. He was communicating strong moral conviction. He was communicating high goals in the eyes of his followers. Does this mean that we should not try to develop and use charismatic leadership techniques? You know, it's a bit like saying, well, I have an overgrown garden, but I'm not going to buy a chainsaw because what if I want all of a sudden to saw my neighbor, the annoying neighbor, in two? The tool is the tool. The morals is in you. The moral and the ethics. Although we might think it does not work with finance employees, it actually does. Surprisingly, finance employees are among those who trust their employer the most. And that's a very good basis for charismatic leadership. And by the way, you owe your people a good show. You do. I mean, otherwise it's so boring. Right? So, 4 takeaways. try to map your leadership experiences and that of others on that life model. I know it's simple, you don't think about it that way. Most books with war stories of leaders, they are useful. Okay, it's the experience of one person. They are useful as long as you think about the whole combo. So not only what the leader had, but what the context was, what sort of followers, what were their ideas about leadership, and so on and so forth. What was the power that the leader had? Leadership is not all in the leader. So stay humble when you win and be kind with yourself when you don't. I wasn't, I didn't, and I almost exited the leadership trajectory. Luckily, that's when fate decided to deal me another hand. This one was a royal flush. A lot of good things happened at the same time. My boss changed to an actual leader from more or less a human machine. The big $300 million euro project was cancelled, which meant that there was much less animosity and conflict in the region, which allowed me to actually think longer and start working on identity for finance in the region and start working on a vision. All the things that I partly didn't know how to, but also didn't have the time for. So I was very lucky to be given the time and the energy to try again. But for every one of me, there are probably several people who just exit passively or actively. There are many people among us who are managers but gave up on this leadership thing because it's just too ideal, too children book like. Manage how others see your leadership. Don't lose sleep over it. One of the many paradoxes of leadership. And the CLTs are a powerful tool, and since they are not very used by finance leaders, this is my anecdotal observation, they might be your competitive advantage, actually. Also for not to take aways, very important. This is not a case against empathy, care for people, value-driven leadership, humility. Those are all very important, just put them in context. This is not an invitation to Machiavellianism. The first person you have to lead is yourself. Before you say something to your people, make sure that you believe in it yourself. Might take some self-leadership, some self-convincing, but make sure it's the same story. It's not an apology for moral relativism. So wait a moment, so if it's strong morals in the eyes of the followers, so then morality doesn't matter. Of course it matters. But as good finance professionals, you know that it's best when you study things separately if they can be studied separately, not mix everything in a hodgepodge. And finally, this is not at all a cynical take on humans or organizations. I actually think organizations have the natural potential for good. They are a great source of meaning, despite some cynical view on them today, corporations especially. And you know, in most reasonably healthy cultures, organizations, most people don't wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, whom am I gonna knife in the back today? Oh, I know it's Jim from Equities, right? That's not how it's done. They could still harm you, but it's not because they want to, it's because they don't have the full information or they have the different narrative than the real one. So it's on you to actually correct those things. And finally, you don't have to be a great leader. Try to be a better leader. So the world won't be maybe a great world, but it will be a better world. And finally, buy my book. David had me put this one in. There's a little discount there as well, and I think we'll make this available, the presentation. Thank you very much.